Welcome to The Explainer. We talk a lot about what makes a society just or fair. It's a huge, complicated question. But today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating framework that gives a surprising answer. It says justice doesn't start with governments or big laws, it actually starts with our own personal habits. So, really, what makes a society fair? It's a question people have been wrestling with forever, right? And the framework we're looking at today has this incredible answer. It says a fair society isn't something that's built from the top down. No, it's built from the ground up. It starts with the character of the people living in it. So let's break down how that actually works. All right, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to talk about the habits that lead to a good life, kind of the personal building blocks. Then we'll zoom in on one super important habit, justice. We'll look at the three different arenas where justice shows up in our lives and see how they all point to one big idea, the common good. And finally, we'll connect all the dots and see why these ancient ideas are so relevant right now. Okay, so before we can even begin to talk about a just society, this whole way of thinking says we have to start with just people. And that all begins with an idea called virtue. So, what is a virtue really? Well, thinkers like St. Thomas Aquinas didn't see it as just, doing a good deed once in a while. They saw it as a deep, ingrained habit. The source material had this great way of putting it. A virtue is like a screw. Every time you practice being honest or patient, you're turning that screw, driving it deeper into who you are, until doing the right thing just becomes second nature. Now, this framework actually splits virtues into two different categories. On one hand, you've got your natural virtues. These are the ones we can all build ourselves through sheer practice, things like courage and honesty. On the other hand, you have supernatural virtues, like faith and hope, which in this tradition are seen as gifts from a higher power. Both are obviously important here, but for our purposes, we're really going to focus on those natural virtues because those are the ones we all have the power to work on. So out of all the virtues we could possibly build, this framework points to four that are like the absolute foundation. They're the pillars holding everything else up. And one of them, well, it's the key to our whole conversation today: justice. These four foundational virtues, they're called the cardinal virtues. And that name is so cool. It comes from the Latin word cardo, which literally means hinge. The idea is that all other good habits kind of swing on these four. They're that essential. And here they are, the big four. You can see how they all fit together. Prudence is kind of like the team's strategist. It helps us figure out what the right thing to do even is. Fortitude is the courage to actually do it, especially when it gets tough. Temperance is all about self-control, making sure our impulses don't run the show. And then there's our main event, justice. This is the one that's all about how we treat other people, giving them what they're owed. This is the classic definition. It sounds so simple, right? Rendering to each his due. But it's also incredibly profound. Justice is about giving every single person what is rightfully theirs. But what does that actually look like? Well, to know if something is just, according to this view, it has to check three boxes. First, it has to be about other people. Justice is always social. You can't be just or unjust all by yourself on a deserted island. Second, it has to be about a duty, something you owe, not just a nice thing you feel like doing. And third, it has to aim for equality. Now, that doesn't mean everyone gets the exact same thing, but that things are fair, proportional, and balanced. Okay, this is where the rubber really meets the road. Because this framework says that justice isn't just some abstract idea or something that only happens in a courtroom. Nope. It operates in three totally distinct arenas that basically make up our entire social world. So here are the three big ones. You've got commutative justice, that's how individuals treat each other. Then there's distributive justice, which is about what society owes to each of us. And finally, legal justice, which is the flip side. It's what we as individuals owe back to society. Let's look at each one with a quick example. Commutative justice is probably the one we understand most intuitively. It's all about fairness in one-on-one exchanges and contracts. You agree to do a job for $100, you do the job, I pay you $100, boom. That's commutative justice. It's simple, arithmetic equality. Distributive justice, though, is a bit more complex. This is about how the community as a whole shares its resources and its burdens. A classic example is a progressive tax system, where people with more resources are expected to contribute a larger share. It's not about sameness, it's about proportionality. And then legal justice completely flips the script. It asks, okay, but what do you owe back to the community? This covers all our duties as citizens, things like obeying fair laws, paying our taxes, or showing up for jury duty. It's about directing our own actions toward the health of the whole group. So you have these three different currents of justice, all flowing in different directions, between you and me, from society down to us, and from us back up to society. But where are they all flowing to? Well, they're all serving one ultimate goal, the true North Star of this entire framework, the common good. Now, it is so important to get this right. The common good is not the same as the will of the majority. It's not about making 51% of the people happy. Instead, think of it as creating a whole social ecosystem, the laws, the culture, the institutions that allows every single person and every group to have a real shot at flourishing. So what are the ingredients of this flourishing ecosystem? This framework lays out three absolute must-haves. First, a deep, fundamental respect for every person and their basic rights. Second, promoting the social well-being of the group by making sure people have access to the things they need to thrive, like food, education, healthcare. And third, you need peace and security, a stable, just order where people can live without constant fear.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. This is a pretty old way of looking at things, so why does it matter so much for the big issues we're all grappling with today?
This is the real magic of it, I think. It draws a perfectly straight line from our private character to our public life. It basically says you can't have a just society without just people. A good society isn't something that politicians just build for us. It's something we build from the ground up in the millions of fair, honest, and virtuous interactions we have with each other every single day.
And this right here is the ultimate test. A contract might seem fair between two people. That's commutative justice, right? But if that contract results in a wage so low that a family can't live with basic dignity, then it violates the common good. And in this view, that makes it unjust. The common good is the final check and balance on everything. And that leaves us with a really challenging question to chew on. In a world that puts so much emphasis on our individual rights and what we are due, this framework forces us to also ask, what do we owe? How can we get better at balancing our own interests with our shared responsibility to build a society where everyone, not just us, has a genuine chance to thrive? It's a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.